Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics and more than a little perturbed this weekend. I was away, I was watching a bit of quite a lot of the Labour Party conference yesterday. In fact, I watched all of it yesterday that was on the stream. And, well, it's all really bad news, isn't it? If you're a Labour supporter, if you want a Labour government. They say never ascribe to malice that which may be explained by incompetence. But now, after the last couple of days, the behaviour of the Labour leadership, that's Jeremy Corbyn, the NEC, the union bosses, may now no longer be explained by incompetence. It can only be malice. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. But first, if you find yourself enjoying the video, then please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. So the first news, it sort of was breaking on Friday before the conference started proper, but I was finding out a bit late. It was on Friday I was finding out about it. And it was a motion that was put to the NEC by John Landsman. Now, John Landsman is the leader of Momentum, which is Corbyn's cult group. No official position within the Labour Party, but he's putting forward this motion there, and it was to abolish the role of deputy leader. Now, a lot of people who are pro-Corbyn are anti-Tom Watson, but the point is this. Tom Watson was elected by the members. Jeremy Corbyn was elected by the members. They were both elected by the members to carry out their role. The reason why the deputy leader role is elected by members is specifically so you have a position in the cabinet or shadow cabinet that the leader of the Labour Party cannot sack. So you have someone there to provide a counter view, which is exactly what Tom Watson does. Yes, sometimes he doesn't always do it in the most diplomatic way, but then neither does Jeremy Corbyn. But at the same time, he is a member choice. To abolish that position is to go against all of those members. Fortunately, when I read about it, it seemed that it did not pass the threshold necessary to get it passed by the NEC. But the motion was supposed to be putting forward conference again. But then it was removed. But I'm going to come on to that in a minute. So in terms of John Landsman, I want to sort of explain the situation with Momentum. Now, you could well imagine, and maybe if you're a Corbyn fan, you are such a person, that you didn't like a lot of the policies of, for example, New Labour, and I'd be with you on that. I didn't like PFI. I'm not in favour of any form of privatisation of public services at all. I didn't really like him getting into the bedroom newspapers, but, you know, to some extent, you have to play the game a little bit. I think, you know, my girlfriend was saying, okay, fair enough. So I can understand if you're saying, look, what we want is a Labour government with a full socialist programme. Absolutely, absolutely, get that completely. But that's not what Momentum want. And there's a clue to this in the bio of the leader, John Landsman, on Twitter. I'll read it out to you. It says, lifelong Labour lefty. So straight away there, these are the sorts of people who talk about Tory Labour, as if there's such a thing. You know, Labour left. You don't have to say both those things. You could just say Labour. It's obvious you're left wing, right? But these are people who will say anyone who's not exactly where they are on the political spectrum is right wing, is a Tory. In which case it's like, well, why are we supporting Labour then? Next point is the real point. It says the wilderness years are over. Think about that. The wilderness years are over. Because that's interesting. Because what he considered the wilderness years was the Labour government. Tony Blair's government, Gordon Brown's government. That's what he considered the wilderness years, when Labour were in power. He considers now not to be the wilderness years, when they're in opposition and with little prospect of forming a government. That's what he considers the wilderness years to be over. Because people like that are not interested in Labour getting into government. They're not necessarily opposed to it, but they're not really that in favour of it. They won't do the sort of things that are needed to ensure it. What they want is control of the Labour Party itself. After all, they don't get to moan and protest and whine about the Tories. If it's Labour in government, they then have to whine and moan about Labour, which is what they do. In fact, these sort of peoples complain more about centre-left, Blairites, Brownites, whatever you want to call them, than they do the Conservatives. They hate their own party more than the Conservatives. Madness, but that is the situation. He then goes on, socialism is now mainstream. I wish it were. But the thing is, when it's mainstream, that means people will vote for it. And they haven't. We're not in government. We're not even ahead in the polls. And that was another thing, because I was thinking, people was, someone was saying last week, and it's fair enough, oh, well, you were behind in the polls last election as well, and then we surged ahead. And yeah, we did, but that was down to two things. Firstly, Theresa May was so god-awful. And obviously, when the Conservatives drop in the polls, something has to fill the vacuum. The Lib Dems weren't doing brilliantly. Jeremy Corbyn was steady, shall we say. Steady, not brilliant, but steady. So Labour filled that vacuum. Great. But the other thing is, they went into overdrive on the campaign for that. Now, in the conference yesterday, the Treasurer was saying that Labour have not taken that campaign footing off. So I said to my girlfriend while watching this, has she just said that when the general election is actually called, that we're not going to be stepping up campaigning? Has she just said this is the best we can do? Oh my God. But anyway, that's the situation we have with this guy. He's not bothered. He doesn't care whether Labour ever gets into government. He just cares about shouting and moaning and whinging. That's it. He wants control of the Labour Party for whatever reason, and he's got it. And it just it just demonstrates that they're only interested in control of the party, not being in government. The other thing about this motion to remove Tom Watson is that Jeremy Corbyn said he didn't know about it. Really? Because here's the thing. For the leader of the Labour Party not to know about a motion being brought before the NEC, the National Executive Committee, either he's lying. A lot of people just assumed that he was lying because people who know how this thing works go, there is no way the Labour leader doesn't know about this. They will. Obviously, a lot of the NEC are his picks. They're not going to keep him in the dark about this. So it is very likely he's lying. But there is another possibility. And that other possibility is that he's not in charge of the party. He's just a puppet, and you've got various people behind the throne pulling his strings. It is one of those two things. There is no other explanation. He can't not know about motions being brought before the NEC. And the other thing is, it wasn't. A lot of people reporting that it was shot down because the motion wasn't going to be debated and voted on at conference. They thought, he's quashed it at least. Because the reports were Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell were absolutely furious, shot it down. No, they haven't. They've deferred it. So what they want to do, they know they were going to get a punch on the nose for this, metaphorically speaking, by conference. So they've deferred it till later. They still want to do this. They still want to get rid of him. They're still carrying on their purge, not just of him, but others as well. But they didn't want to do it in they know that they know straight away that whatever was discussed at conference yesterday, I haven't even looked at the Sunday headlines yet, but when I do, I know what they're going to say. It's all going to be about the Labour infighting. Well done. Just when maybe it looked like Labour might just have been taking a step forward, 2 steps back, and it's all deliberate as well. And they are going for a full-on purge as well, an absolute full-on purge. There seems to be a suggestion that the NEC are getting ready, not imminently, but in the next year, for Jeremy Corbyn to step down. And they're making sure that, because at the moment, if he were to step down, there is no way the Parliamentary Labour Party would allow someone like that to get on the ballot. They took a chance with him. It was a disaster. It was the biggest disaster ever. Any choice of a Labour leader, I think. They're not going to be that stupid again. So they're trying to make sure that it has to be. They're trying to basically, they're turning the party into a fascist dictatorship. And the problem is now, at the moment, if you reduce your appeal, they're not even trying to appeal to the full scope of the left wing of politics in the centre, which is where, by the way, most of the voters are, in the centre and the centre-left. That's where most Labour voters are. Or most of the people who will vote Labour on the times when they get into government. They're not even attempting. In fact, they're trying to dissuade them by telling them that they're not welcome, purging them out of the party, which also means, by definition, by extension, purging the people who are not necessarily in the party but would vote for those sorts of people. I mean, it doesn't really matter in a way because Labour cannot form a majority government while they're doing this. The only way they can, and this is what we're dependent on, is if the Brexit Party do us a solid and completely scupper the Conservatives. That's our only chance. That is our chance. How bad is it when we are dependent on a Labour government, not on the Labour leadership, but on a far-right, xenophobic, elitist group to help us out. It's absolute madness. So that's strike one as far as I'm concerned. Then there's the issue of the complete lack of democracy at conference. Now, this isn't just something new this year, but it is very stark yesterday. It's often been muddied. The situation. Let me paint the picture for you. A report was given to conference. Few people had various things to say about certain elements of it. The NEC came back with some responses which were not very well received by the members, the Labour members, the CLP. Now, the CLP, these are the guys who are representing their local constituencies at the conference, who are busting a gut trying to get Labour elected. Every election, all the time, they're doing fundraisers, they're walking the streets, they are knocking on doors, they're taking part in all sorts of events, trying to persuade people to vote and to vote Labour. Absolutely busting a gut. And the report, when it was put to a vote, do you accept this report? The vast majority of them turned it down. There was a show of hands. The vast majority of them were rejecting this report. But, the NEC chair looked at it, and for reasons I'll go over in a minute, went, we need it on a card vote. We need a paper ballot basis. And they did that. And it came back. Remember, all the hands clearly indicated overwhelmingly it was rejected. It came back accepted 60-40. Ooh, there's some fiddling going on, you may ask. No, not exactly. What happens is, at a conference, I can't remember the exact numbers, you've got, I think I called my girlfriend who was there last year, you've got about 1,200 CLP delegates. These are Labour members going out campaigning for Labour. And you've got about 300 union delegates. Now, these union delegates are not necessarily even Labour supporters. You would imagine the ones that go to the Labour conference are probably Labour supporters. But they may be working really hard for their union, and that is all to the betterment of the Labour Party as well. But at the same time, they're not voted for by Labour supporters. They're not there because of Labour supporters. They're outside of Labour. And yet, they get votes. Well, about 300 of those, well, they're outnumbered. But their votes are worth 4 or 5. Basically, the situation is this. If the union, as a block, vote for a particular thing, it's happening. So that's what that situation was. That's why it was 60-40, because the union delegates voted in favour of it. And this is what's going to happen. This is why, when last year I was saying, and people were going, oh, no, it was voted for by conference. And I was saying, conference wanted Jeremy Corbyn to get fully behind a public vote last conference, and they didn't. And everyone was going, but conference voted for the motion that went forward. No, they didn't. The unions did, not the CLP. And the same thing's going to happen this year. Finally, he's got behind a public vote with Remain as an option. But this time, they want to get fully behind Remain. I haven't even seen the vote on that yet. I don't even know whether it's taken place yet. I've not been watching it today. But it won't, because they'll tell the unions to vote that particular way. It's totally undemocratic. And here's the thing. The unions have a very important place in Labour. So important. But they should not dictate things, because ultimately those delegates are voting the way their union bosses have told them to. Those union bosses are elected by union members. Those union members may or may not be Labour supporters. You've got union bosses there who may be voted into office by Conservative supporters, Lib Dem supporters, people who are completely apolitical. It's not right. These guys who are outside in all weathers busting a gut to get Labour elected are being completely ignored. And I don't know why they put up with it. And then the third thing is Len McCluskey. So he is really the union boss. He's the union kingpin. Because in actual fact, Labour's current Brexit position is McCluskey's. Because the other union bosses want Labour to get behind Remain as well. If it was done democratically, that's the position. But the unions like to be harmonious. They like to talk, as one, make it all sound united. But McCluskey is he's good at playing chicken. He just waits till the rest come around to his way of thinking. Or if not way of thinking, at least do as exactly as he says. The others aren't so strong as he is. So that's why we have this ridiculous position. And as if he wasn't wielding enough power by effectively blocking out the union votes to railroad through literally any motion he supports and blocking everyone he opposes. So you've not only got John Lansman, you've got Len McCluskey as well. Two people who have got nothing to do with the official Labour structure, who are actually pulling the strings on the Labour leadership. And again, that's not democracy. But what he said was, as well, because the situation with this, we know Jeremy Corbyn wants Brexit. So he wants to get another Brexit agreement and put that to the people, and he wants people to vote for that. But basically, the rest of the shadow cabinet, virtually to a man and a woman, are saying, no, we're going to vote to remain, sorry. We're going to campaign to remain. We're not interested in some Lexit agreement. We need to remain, and we need to be clear about that. So Len McCluskey is now saying that these people should leave the shadow cabinet. So that is publicly embarrassing Jeremy Corbyn, because these members of the shadow cabinet are Jeremy Corbyn's appointments. He decides if he doesn't like one of them, or if he thinks they're not towing his line, he's well within his rights to dismiss them. He's done it before, and I'm sure he could do it again. So why is this guy publicly saying that undermining Jeremy Corbyn by attacking members of his shadow cabinet? And as I say, we're not talking about Tom Watson, the one member of the shadow cabinet Corbyn can do nothing about. We're talking about the ones he personally selected. So the situation now is the actual policies, the manifesto, I'm sure I'll be quite pleased with, apart from the Brexit policy. But the bottom line is, if I'm trying to sort of say to people, well, for these reasons, we'd want a Labour government. Someone turns around and says to me, but you're just swapping one fascist dictatorship for another, aren't you? The answer now has to be, yes, but maybe one with kinder policies. And that's the best I can do, I'm afraid. That is the best I can do. So as far as I'm concerned now, I don't care anymore. I've said for the longest time, given him so many chances, he's just got worse and worse each time. As far as I'm concerned, Jeremy Corbyn is a dictator and he needs to be removed. And he's not going to be anytime soon. We just need to hope that when he does step down, and it sounds like they're expecting him to step down within a year, I don't know what's up, but that's the situation, that he is replaced, that it's the Parliamentary Labour Party that replace him, which they should, and that we rescue Labour. Because although I'm happy to have a Labour leadership that's on the proper left, you have to appeal to the rest of people as well. That's how you get into government. Because if you don't do that, then you're enabling a Tory government. That's the bottom line. You don't get to moan at the Tories because you enabled it. And the thing is as well, if Jeremy Corbyn can't form a government in November or whenever it ends up being, that'll be twice now that he, in a general election, has said he's going to win it and hasn't, which will make him either a liar or a fool, and whichever, not really worthy of leader. But anyway, that's that little rant over with now. I hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please get the Patreon link for details. Until next time, I'll see you later.